Free to send any left over our way. That is One News this Wednesday.
Now over to Mark with close-ups. Good night.
Thanks, guys. Good evening. $75 billion in forged banknotes. How the investigation into an alleged conspiracy to defraud the Bank of England has led to a New Zealander now sitting in a Tauranga police cell. His only interview just prior to his arrest. Also tonight,
he's done wonders for the place.
He's a local hero. Now to that only interview with a Kiwi caught up in an alleged plot to defraud the Bank of England of £28 billion. That's right, £28 billion or 75 billion New Zealand dollars. Brian Archer, who describes himself as a 59-year-old company director with an accounting background, says he's done nothing wrong. But he now faces extradition from New Zealand to the UK to answer fraud charges alongside 6 others who are already in the dock. Mr Archer appeared in the Tauranga District Court today and was remanded in custody until another hearing on Friday. But as Tony Reid discovered, Brian Archer has a colourful past.
Brian Walter Archer.
Brian Walter Archer, one of Britain's most wanted, the Kiwi man allegedly a key player in an extraordinary plot to con the Bank of England out of $78 billion.
As a sophisticated international con.
British police claim he tried to cash a pile of special issue fake notes like these, worth $1.5 million each. Brian says this isn't monopoly money, it's the real deal.
They realised that there was some validity to all of this, and they realised what their total obligations were, and I don't think they had any intention of paying. So the best way was to come down like a sledgehammer on a mosquito.
What you're about to hear is an amazing story.
Well, the charges relate to an attempt or a conspiracy by him and 6 other people in the UK to defraud the Bank of England.
Those 6 are currently on trial in London. New Zealander Brian Archer is number 7.
There was nothing that I saw or heard and that was translated to me that gave any impression at all that this was a forgery and that these people had actually hatched and cooked this thing up and were asking a few people to take it to the bank on their behalf.
Brian Archer represents a number of Chinese families who in the 1940s, he claims, gave the Bank of England £180 million worth of gold. The bank then issued the families with these special issue bills, $53 million worth, interest not included. Then, late last year, Brian Archer says he and his associates were approached by the Chinese to redeem those banknotes.
The family does consist of 6 very elderly Chinese people. Their offspring make up over 4,000 people plus.
A number of meetings took place between Brian Archer's group and the Bank of England. A £500,000 bill was submitted for examination.
All notes are redeemable forever. And we went there on the basis of, you tell us whether this is real or not. There was no attempt to present them in any way to get a pecuniary advantage from them, other than just going to the bank and saying, is it real or isn't it? Let us know.
The Bank of England, he says, then delayed further meetings, saying they needed more time to examine the bill, until March, when the sledgehammer came down and police in London arrested and charged 6 people with conspiring to defraud the bank. Brian Archer was considered a man on the run until he was arrested yesterday in Tauranga. He gave this interview to Investigate magazine before then to set the record straight.
Scotland Yard have allegedly named you as part of the group and suggested that there's a manhunt underway to find you. Your reaction to that?
Staggering, shocked, considering that way back in April last year, my lawyer wrote to the investigating officer, Richard Fisher, from the London Police, and said, Mr Archer is available for an interview if you want to. So where's the hiding, where's the at-large, where's on-the-run business come into it? We're talking 7 months now, and Fisher and his men have never bothered to come and interview me.
Now, if you think Brian Archer looks familiar, you'd be right, on a number of fronts. Here he is during last month's terror arrests, talking to TV3 about similar operations. He says existed near Whakatane 20 years ago.
Well, I'd been told by my friend who was a tūhoi that they were training doing military trials training there. I wasn't told for what purposes or what reasons, but you don't have to stretch your imagination when you saw what was there.
And if you go back to the early 1990s, here he is again as a National Party candidate in Mangere. He's also been involved in charity work, seen here trying to raise $10 million for cyclone relief in the Pacific. In March this year, the Good Samaritan was convicted and fined $18,000 under the Financial Reporting Act. Tonight, he's behind bars in Tauranga, facing extradition.
Yeah, I consider him, or the police consider him, a flight risk. He's facing some very serious charges, and they'll be dealt with when he gets back to the UK.
London police say the plan came unstuck when they presented £500,000 notes that had never existed, and not correctly forging the signature of Sir Jasper Quintus Hollam, the bank's chief cashier in 1963. He always used his first two initials when signing his name, not just the first, as seen here on these notes.
What about the mistakes in the notes?
Deliberate mistakes were put into the notes to prevent counterfeiting. Amazing, and yet they accuse us of counterfeiting them. And the Bank of England documentation is quite specific on that and clearly says mistakes were put into this to avoid counterfeiting of it.
In fact, Brian Archer is so convinced of his innocence and the injustice faced by his Chinese clients that he wrote to Britain's Chancellor of the Exchequer, the equivalent of our Finance Minister. His 10-page letter outlines his version of events, saying good honest men are in prison and others are awaiting trial for conspiracy. He says someone blinked too soon and damage has been done which can never be reversed. But he says further damage can be avoided and that he's yet to disclose any information to the media or investigative journalists. Now, that's all changed.
Absolutely. It was suggested along the line that the bank, in incorporating the mistakes, had no intention of paying it because they could then say it's counterfeit. Because this really is a tip of an iceberg for them, but it's certainly not 28 billion. And as I've said before, that figure never came into any discussions that I had with the bank. It was only 180 million.
And Investigate magazine will have a special feature on Brian Archer in this very bizarre case in next week's issue. Look, just on the scale of that, you heard Brian saying there were 4,000 members of the family. If they got the money from the bank, each member would have got 16 million New Zealand dollars. Now, still to come, the very talented Liam Finn, and plans for another family pair-up, perhaps?
We've often talked about how we can make a record and call it Finn Brothers and